It's George Christensen here on the TNT Radio George Christensen Show. Thanks very much for joining us for this next hour. And we're joined by conservative activist and author Geoffrey Grimshaw. Geoffrey's actually running in the New South Wales state election that's taking place in Australia at the moment. As I said, he's a conservative activist, he's an author. He's based down there in Sydney. He actually co-wrote the book Trigger Warming, Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Global Warming, but Were Afraid to Ask, a book that actually challenges the mainstream narrative on climate change. And I find it's one that actually provides the facts, logic, and common sense that dispels the fear of some climate catastrophe that's going to wipe us all out. As I told you, he's running in the New South Wales state election for a party known as the Liberal Democrats. And I believe that he's running in the seat of North Shore against someone who we'll talk about a bit later and what he's done, Matt Keane, who's turned the New South Wales Liberal Party into a version of the Green Party. But look, it's a pleasure to be joined by Geoffrey Grimshaw. Jeff, are you there, mate?
Yes, I am. Thanks, George. It's great to be here.
Thank you. I know that you have been involved in a lot of different conservative forums and events where you're advocating for things like lower taxes, smaller government, individual liberty and free speech. But one of the key things that I wanted to talk to you about was your book, Trigger Warming, because we're living in a time right now where it seems that climate change is being used for one simple thing, and that is control. We could go through all of the facts. We will go through them a little bit later on, but I want to talk about the control part of it first, because we've got outfits like, for instance, Oxfordshire Council, I think it might be, Oxford City Council, that are talking about having this climate lockdown. Now, they don't call it that because it scares people. They call it a 15-minute city. I just was speaking to a previous guest, Dr. Stephen Chavura, that said before it was called 15-minute cities, they were called smart cities. It all sounds good. You know, it's about convenience. It's about having things within a short distance of your own home. That all sounds great until they start talking about the punitive and restrictive parts of these 15-minute cities or these smart cities, which is exactly why they are climate lockdowns. Now, that's not the only restrictive thing to come out of climate change, but it is one that is going to impact on a lot of people. How do you see, given that you've written a book on this topic, the whole climate change agenda playing out vis-a-vis control by the so-called globalist elite?
Well, it's interesting that they call these cities smart cities, first of all. Everything seems to have this prefix smart nowadays. You've got smart fridges and smart air conditioners and smart cars, and they're all controlled, as you said. That's the key word, control. And they can be controlled from somewhere that we don't really know or understand, or somebody else is in control of those things. There's that famous example of the air conditioners in Queensland that they were able to, the smart air conditioners, that they were able to switch off. And really it's what they're essentially saying is that we have all of these smart machines run by AI, which means that the people using them must therefore be dumb. And that's the form of control they want over us. And they will use global warming as an excuse for imposing this control further and further and further, all the way down to every last morsel of meat that, if you're lucky to eat meat, that you buy and eat, down to your calories. We can already do this. We already have apps that measure our calories and smart scales that can, measure our body fat and so on. I mean, it's some of these things are frightening. At the same time, they're useful, but it depends who is controlling them. Who has access to that data, and what is it going to be used for? And is it going to be used to impose more control over us and what we do and what we eat? These things should be a choice for us, not for somebody else. And that's really the core message of the Liberal Democrats, is that personal autonomy is ours. We are a party of freedom and liberty, and we do not want to be controlled by the government or anybody else.
Well, let's quickly talk about that. You're running for the state election in Australia and New South Wales. Those elections are going to be on very, very soon. We've got the Liberal Party, which is in Australia, for the international listeners, the Conservative Party here in this country, which sort of to some people doesn't make sense, but it's supposed to be the Conservative Party. It's supposed to be the Libertarian Party, but the reality is it's become anything but in recent years, particularly its New South Wales branch. So tell me, what is the difference between the Liberal Democrats now and the Liberal Party, which was supposed to be the mainstream Conservative Libertarian Party?
Well, it's quite simple, really. The Liberals were the party of Robert Menzies, and now we are the party of Robert Menzies. It's as simple as that. I know being called the Liberal Democrats is probably quite scary to our American audience because we have two of the worst words, liberal and Democrats. But we really are a libertarian and conservative party that's probably most similar to the Republicans. And I would also say the old conservatives, the Thatcherite Reagan era of conservatives in the UK and the US respectively. And everybody else has shifted leftwards. We've stayed where we are. We've always had the same principles, and we will stick to those principles because we are a party of principles. These parties, Liberals, the Liberals, Labour, Greens, they have no principles anymore. They will sell out to anything and to anybody for the highest bidder in exchange for power, money, fame, whatever it is.
Cheap votes. So were you one of those, Jeff, were you one of those people who were normally a Liberal Party supporter and voter? As I say, the Liberal Party being the mainstream conservative/libertarian party up until recently in Australia. Were you one of those people who became disillusioned and left to join the Liberal Democrats?
Yes, I last voted for the Liberals in 2016. Around the time of Malcolm Turnbull, when he said something along the lines of, well, the Conservatives in the Liberal Party don't matter. And I said, well, fine, if we don't matter, then you won't miss our votes then. And that's when the first very large chunk of us left. And then the following year, Cory Bernardi left the Liberal Party, formed the Australian Conservatives, whom I joined. And then subsequently, when the AC dissolved in 2019, I joined the Liberal Democrats.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's move away from Australian politics and go back to the topic of climate change. What prompted you, in conjunction with Rafe Champion, who is another brilliant mind, to write the book Trigger Warming?
Well, it was initially Rafe's plan, and he'd started writing the book. He wrote the first 2 or 3 chapters, and it came to me and said, look, I'm struggling a bit with this. Can you help edit? And so I started editing, and then I said, well, maybe we should have a chapter on this, and maybe we should put in some drawings, and we should also do a chapter on the computer models, which is my expertise. And eventually 3 chapters turned into 12 or 13. And Rafe said, look, this is mostly your book now, so you take the book off me and go and publish it. And I said, well, okay, sure. But yeah, Rafe started this, and his aim and my aim as well was to write something short and simple that the everyday person could understand. There's many great books on climate change out there, and I really enjoy reading them. But the average person is not going to wade through 500 pages and 600 pages of these. A lot of I would say the skeptical books, because they don't have the time. Often they don't have the background to be able to understand it all, and a lot of it is just not relevant to them. It's very interesting to me, the properties of dolomite, and why we can use dolomite as a proxy for carbon dioxide, past measurements of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. But to the average person who just wants cheap, reliable power, they're not that interested in that side of it. So I just wanted to keep things simple. And fun as well. So all of the chapters in the book are named after movies. So the book about wind is called Gone with the Wind, and the book about carbon dioxide being this terrible, deadly gas is called The Phantom Menace. So it's a fun book. It's light-hearted somewhat, but it's also serious. It's got lots of lovely illustrations in it, infographics that I used to love when I was a kid, and it's just a really fun read. And you can get through it in a couple of days, and you will have the basics and the grounding of the understanding of the global warming argument.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. So you're right in saying that a lot of the books that are out there, they're tomes, and they've got a lot of science in it. And I understand why that's the case. I mean, when we are told that the basis of any argument against climate change or against climate alarmism, I should say, is unscientific, well, there has to be a lot of scientific rigor put into that, but it unfortunately makes it inaccessible to the common person that doesn't have those degrees. And that in turn leads to this pervading myth of, well, if you don't have the degree, if you don't have the expertise in the field, then you can't proffer an opinion. So I'm very glad that yourself and Rafe joined together to do this book, Trigger Warming, because getting this sort of information to the average person is very, very important if we are to stop what is going to come. And what is going to come is this usurpation of power. It really will be. There will be so much control that is put, so much centralization of control, that I should say, is going to be put in front of us, as if it will be a panacea to a problem that, quite frankly, doesn't really exist. We're already seeing industries, particularly in Australia, that have just been cast to the wayside or are being cast right now to the wayside as a result of this push for net zero, which is just ridiculous, to be quite frank. I mean, net zero will do absolutely nothing. Even if you believed wholesale in the climate alarmist theory, it will do absolutely nothing for the planet. What it will do is a lot to the economy. Net zero emissions, a policy of that, in Australia, a country which produces less than 2%
by
of the world's overall carbon emissions,
political candidate and
it'll
author
only
Jeffrey Grimshaw,
jobs,
who's written the
particularly
book
in areas
with
outside cities.
fellow
Where they
co-author
don't
Rafe
employ,
Champion,
climate
called
consultants.
Trigger Warming, which is all about climate change. Now, it's debunking or busting some of the myths that are out there around climate change. One of those myths is that the science is settled, and this claim that 97% of scientists all agree that climate change is a reality and man is causing it, as if somehow that a vote and a consensus creates a fact. Well, it doesn't. But even that claim that there is this consensus is bogus. Do you have anything to bring to us that busts that particular myth there, Jeffrey, around the 97%?
How long have you got? I mean, that fraudulent study that kicked the whole thing off has been debunked so many times, and that was a study done by.
But yet we hear it time and again. So I'm going to give you as much time as you want here, because this one, we really do need to debunk it.
Oh yeah, well, it's the old phrase about a lie gets halfway around the world before truth has had a chance to get its boots on, and that lie was spread everywhere very quickly. Not that it even matters. I mean, even if it was true that 97% of scientists agreed, even if it was 99.9999% of scientists, science is not done by a vote. It's not done by consensus. Science is not a vote. Now, if science was actually settled by consensus, then the sun would orbit the Earth, because that was a consensus at one time. Smoking would be good for you, because that was a consensus at one time as well.
4 out of 5 doctors said so.
Oh yeah. We have the old adverts there, and there's so many other examples of something that we said was a consensus that has turned out to not be a consensus. So consensus is not a term that we use in science. You just have facts and data and evidence, and as Einstein quite correctly pointed out, when the essay against him or letter to him from 100 scientists came in refuting him, he said, "Why 100? You should only need one scientist to refute me."
Exactly. So, how is the claim, though? I mean, I agree with you. 97% doesn't matter. Consensus does not equal fact. And that is going to be clear here. That you might have the majority of scientists around the world, maybe, who agree with the whole theory of climate alarmism. But just because a majority believes something does not make it right, does not make it fact, does not make it so. But that claim is wrong. Can you just explain how the 97% figure is wrong?
Well, the person who wrote the paper, John Cook, effectively went through about 12,000 papers and then selected the ones he wanted to concentrate on. He didn't actually read the papers; they just looked at the abstracts, which is just the brief part at the beginning. And if you actually read his paper, it's not a very good paper at all. It's very, very opaque. And he says that, in the paper, they could actually only find about 30% of people who actually endorsed the idea that man was having some kind of effect on the temperature of the Earth. So how did that 30% become 97? Well, he decided to change the rules of the game, as it were, and he said, amongst the abstracts I've read, those expressing a position on anthropogenic global warming, 97% endorse the consensus position that humans are causing global warming. So in other words, he'd managed to manipulate the statistics and twist them in such a way as to say that, any scientist who was writing on global warming immediately was branded as somebody who thought that global warming was caused by man and it was catastrophic. So, I mean, this is why they changed the term global warming to climate change in the first place.
Climate change, correct. And then they can unload any natural sin, in inverted commas, to that term because you can say, oh, look, it's raining, that's climate change. Even though once upon a time we have climate alarmists, such as the former chief scientist in Australia, I think he was a chief scientist for a while, Tim Flannery, or at least he was a fated scientist, claimed that it wasn't going to rain again because of global warming. Now, when it rains, and when it rains heavy, that's global warming, or that's climate change, rather. When it snows, that's climate change. When weather does anything as it normally is wont to do, it's now climate change, which annoys me no end, but there you go. Now,
the analogy is playing roulette. And let's say you have a roulette table with 36 squares from 0, 1, or 1 to 36, and you buy 36 chips and you put one chip on every single number, you're always going to win. Well, technically win. You don't actually win anything because you still got 36 chips at the end of it. And that's what they do. It's going to, if it rains, it's climate change. If it's hot, it's climate change. They bet a chip on every square. And then when it happens, they go, oh, yes, we were right. Look, it's climate change.
And that is essentially right. I mean, from the get-go. So we've, the 97% of scientists claim is complete bunkum, even though if it was true, it still wouldn't make climate change or so-called climate change a fact. But let's look at history, and I know that you do talk about this in the book Trigger Warning. Human history and natural history actually shows that there have been warmer periods, not far off in the past, actually in the recent past, that there have been warmer periods than there are now, and that those periods have been conducive to human flourishing. That is true, isn't it? We've got things like the medieval warming period to prove it.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. It was much warmer during the medieval period, and during Roman times, when you could grow grapes in the north of England, which is just unheard of. People would laugh at you if you tell them that now, that you could grow grapes in the north of England. It's far too cold now. And then, of course, there's Greenland, which was called Greenland for a reason. If we were naming it, if we discovered it tomorrow, we would call it White Land. We wouldn't be calling it Greenland, would we?
No.
That's when the Vikings settled there, and they lived there, and they had settlements there for quite a while, and they even grew crops there. So yeah, it was much warmer in the past, and that was also happened to be the times when things were much more peaceful and there was far less death. It was when it cooled down again and we started to go into the Little Ice Age that things got pretty bad. There was mass starvation, regular famines. The Thames was frozen over, and that's actually what kind of led to the Industrial Revolution, because people used to heat their homes and stay warm by cutting down trees, and they needed another source of heat to warm their homes, because they're cutting down so many trees. People had known about coal for a long time, but it was very difficult to mine and to get out of mines because they were often flooded, and they would have to get the water out of those mines, which led to the invention of the steam engine, which was first used to get water out of mines in order to get to the coal, because they wanted the coal because it was cold to heat their homes and to stay warm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you're right about what you said. No one can actually refute those facts. I distinctly remember viewing a documentary where they went through talking about the grapes growing in northern England there, where they went through and they looked at some of the street names and the area names, and they were all associated with grape growing and with vineyards. So that's very interesting. So look, let's take it from, I guess, the historical and the abstract through to modern reality. It seems that governments of all political hues have decided that this is a thing, that we need to do something about it, and they're putting in place policies that actually do something. I don't know that they do anything about the issue of climate change in itself, because I really don't know that anything is going to affect the climate that humans can do, apart from if you're going to be seeding clouds or something like that. But they do something that is negative to an economy. They do something that's negative to a society. What, as a political candidate for office in Australia, what are the things that you're seeing on the ground in terms of specific policies by governments, either state or federal, and what harm they are causing to either Australian industry or Australian citizens?
Well, the 30,000-foot view is this: we're deindustrializing, and if we want to go down this path, then we're going to have to accept a much, much lower standard of living. We all know that, or at least the skeptics know that renewable energy, or unreliable energy, as I like to call it, just will not work. It's impossible. We've had so many engineers and electrical engineers, civil engineers look at this problem and say, renewable energy is just impossible. Net zero is impossible. There is no point pursuing it. And as you said earlier, even if you believe that in catastrophic man-made global warming, there is nothing that Australia can do, that we will have absolutely no effect on the temperature. And why anybody thinks that if we do something, the rest of the world will follow, I have no idea, because I don't think any country has ever followed Australia's lead on anything ever. So why people think that's going to happen? Well, we're blowing up and destroying our coal plants, whilst all of the India and China are replacing and building coal-fired power plants every month almost. So what on the earth are we doing? Well, we're deindustrializing the country, and that's deindustrialization is Western civilization was built on the Industrial Revolution. That is the basis of Western civilization. it was the Industrial Revolution. There's a few other things in there as well as Christianity and we have things like Magna Carta and the Declaration of Independence. That's the sort of political side, but the economic side of it of Western civilization was the Industrial Revolution. And we are going through, or they want to put us through, this deindustrialization and undo everything we've built that has made our lives so comfortable that people simply do not recognize how important cheap, reliable energy is to not just our everyday lives, but the entire economy. It just doesn't seem to resonate with people. I think well, we all know how bad the curriculum is in this country and other countries. They just don't teach this history anymore. The Industrial Revolution should be a core topic of every classroom in the Western world and the rest of the world, because it has brought us the greatest prosperity we've ever seen. And it's brought us the greatest. Nobody says it's perfect, because it's not, but it is far superior to any system we have ever had. And if we lose it, then I'm afraid we'll go back to this. Well, I don't know about the Stone Age, but I think probably something equivalent to the feudal system, where we're all serfs.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right. I think there's a topic for another discussion, but there's the Industrial Revolution certainly gave rise to great prosperity, coupled with the free enterprise system. Unfortunately, somewhere on the way to the Colosseum, it's taken a left turn, and I do use that turn and that left being very specific there. It's taken a left turn, and we ended up with crony capitalism, but that's a topic for another day. But now you are running in the New South Wales state election. Your seat you're running in is North Shore. Have I got that right,
Hornsby.
Jeffrey?
Hornsby. Yeah.
Hornsby. Apologies. Hornsby is located in the North Shore. Is that how I got that wrong, or no? Am I completely off track?
It's yes, it's on the North Shore. It's the north of the North Shore. Yeah.
The north of the North Shore. So we're talking about a very well-to-do area, and your local member, the current sitting member, is none other than Matt Kean. Is that correct?
That's correct. The Minister for No Energy.
Right. So let's talk to viewers who are outside of New South Wales, and even those in that may not be up on New South Wales state politics. Who is Matt Kean? Now, please don't get me into trouble for defamation, but who is Matt Kean?
Well, Matt Kean, quite simply, he's in the wrong electorate and he's in the wrong party. He should be in either Labour. He should actually be in the Greens, I think, and that's why his nickname is Matt the Green Kean. So he's absolutely hell bent on renewables. He wants to cover an area of New South Wales in wind turbines and solar panels. He's pretty much carved out this area around the Hunter all the way up to Maitland and said this is going to be a special economic zone where we will be the renewable masters of the universe, and some polywaffle like that. And he also wants wind turbines offshore as well, which is just crazy. It's very, very expensive to put these things offshore and to maintain them offshore. I mean, they're expensive enough as it is. Why they keep saying renewables are the cheapest form of energy? They're not. If they were the cheapest form of energy, then the energy companies would have built and deployed these wind and solar a long, long time ago. Because if they were the cheapest, then they would be making the most profit off those. But they're not the cheapest.
Correct.
That's as simple as that. And that's Matt Kean for you.
And Matt Kean almost himself proves that they're not the cheapest by the fact that we're constantly hearing from him and his ilk about the need to funnel more taxpayer-funded subsidies and to put more mandates and regulations in place to ensure the take-up of renewables. It occurs to me, if these things were as cheap and as productive and as efficient as the whole lot of the litany of climate alarmists say that they are, then why aren't they standing on their own feet? I mean, that's a rhetorical question. We know the answer because they're not productive, they're not efficient, they're not the cheapest. In the time we have left, by Geoffrey Grimshaw, he's the author of a book called Trigger Warming, all about climate change. He's also running as a candidate for the Libertarian Liberal Democrat Party in the New South Wales state election. And he's running against the New South Wales Energy Minister, Matt Kean. We were just discussing the kind of policies that Matt Kean has overseen and wants to continue overseeing. He's someone who's in what nominally should be the conservative / libertarian mainstream political party, the Liberals, but yet acts more like a member of the Greens political party. He wants to see wind farms everywhere, solar panels everywhere, right across New South Wales. And yet he wants to shut down productive industry in the same breath. So what are some of the very, very localised things that you see Matt Kean has pushed for that's been detrimental, Geoffrey?
Well, obviously, renewable energy is one thing, but there's another sort of dark side. There's Matt Kean's green side, but Matt Kean also has quite a dark side to him. In an interview he did with on the ABC, it was during COVID, I think it was about a year or two ago, Lee Sales asked him, do you think that vaccines should be mandatory for anybody? And this is Matt Kean's reply, and I'm quoting him here, so please don't think this is me saying it. So this is what Matt Kean said. He said, I think that the proposal on the table is not about providing more restrictions on freedom. They're about providing freedoms from restrictions. So if people choose to go and get vaccinated, they should be rewarded with more freedoms. That's what we're doing here in New South Wales. People aren't being compelled to get a vaccine in New South Wales. If they don't wish to have a vaccine, then they can stay at home and they can adhere to the lockdown laws. We're offering a pathway out and an opportunity to have more freedoms. End quote.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting that you bring that up because there is almost a direct correlation. In fact, someone in the field of psychology or political psychology should go and do a thesis on this and graph it out for us, because I think the greater that you supported all of that COVID hysteria, the greater that you supported lockdowns, the greater that you supported mask mandates, the greater that you supported vaccine mandates, I pretty well guarantee you're going to see a chart there showing that you support all of the climate change hysteria as well, all of the controlling climate policies, such as the 15-minute city climate lockdowns that we talked about earlier. And so Matt Kean is the embodiment of that, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I mean, that graph would unlike the graph of CO2 and warming and cooling, which does not correlate, that graph would correlate perfectly. I mean, if that quote does not send a shiver down your spine, then you need to check your pulse and make sure you're not a zombie, because that is frighteningly Orwellian. We're not restricting your freedoms, we're offering you freedom from restrictions. I mean, that is literally straight out of 1984. And then you're going to be rewarded with more freedoms. He thinks that freedom is a reward, a gift from the government that the government
Correct.
doles out to people. And if he thinks that freedom is controlled and maintained by the government, then he also thinks that they can take it away whenever they like, whenever, at their whim, they will take away your freedoms. Now you apply that to his loony green credentials, and you can see what's coming down the road.
Yeah, it's scary indeed. I mean, I look, Geoffrey, I served in public office for actually 17 years, 11 of which I served as a federal MP. And, that when people end up in that place where they think that they are the ones that matter and the people are subservient to them, they really have ended up in the wrong place in a democracy and in a dark place for democracy. The view that the people are there to serve the government, that the government can say to you, well, you can have this particular freedom, but we're going to apply this restriction on you and all the rest of it. It is just nonsense, and it really subverts how democracy should run. So I'm assuming that your philosophy as a political candidate is the complete opposite of that. Can you give me Geoffrey Grimshaw, not the Liberal Democrats, but Geoffrey Grimshaw's political philosophy in a few minutes?
In a few minutes, well, it's
Sum
quite
it up
simple.
for us, mate.
In a word, liberty.
Yeah.
It's George Washington. It's the Declaration of Independence. It's the it's everything to do with the struggles we've had to go through to maintain and win our liberty at every level. And as you correctly said, these people that agreed with the COVID restrictions they're control freaks. We do not want the government in charge of every aspect of our lives. We want the government to be as small as possible. It's not no government. It's just the government should not be interfering in things that the government has no mandate over. That they should keep out of our lives. They should stop taxing us to death. We pay around half of the money we earn in taxes, and I'm not talking about income tax. Income tax is just one of 120 taxes that we have in this country. Every time you buy something, you're paying GST. Every time you buy a beer, cigarettes, whatever, you're paying excise duty. You've got fuel and road tax, and we just pay tax after tax after tax. People revolted over a tea tax in America. We almost had a revolution here over a tiny increase on the miners down in Victoria. There was almost a revolt there. So and they've just hiked up taxes on super yet again. Why are we not out in the streets revolting over this? We've become lazy and complacent, I think, and this is
compliant. That's what's been very sad about the demise of the Australian. I got to say, I mean, once upon a time, people, you thought of what an Aussie was, at least from an international perspective. You were thinking of the larrikin, the guy who gave the middle finger to authority. But sadly, COVID showed us that was actually not the case in modern Australia, that we were very much a subservient people. We're very much compliant populists that look to government to protect us rather than looking to our own freedom and the freedom of our family. We wanted there to be security. It might be a bastardized saying, but there's a quote that's attributed, misattributed to Benjamin Franklin, about the population that puts safety over liberty will end up with neither. And I think that's the reality for Australia's future. That's pretty bleak to say, but after I saw what happened with COVID, I think there's got to be some great bubble that's burst, or else we are going to go marching down that corridor, which will end up with a doorway which will be total control by government over the populace. And it's one of the reasons that I did want to speak to you, Geoffrey, because going back to your book, Trigger Warming, and back to the issue of climate change, past the COVID mania, climate change is the one that they're going to focus on. They already have started focusing on it to bring about control. So what do you think has to happen to bust this latest control myth? Because despite the fact that we could sit here, you and I, both preaching to the converted, about all of these lies that are put up around climate alarmism, what is it that the everyday person has to do to bust through this agenda?
In 2 words, wake up. Look, COVID was rather depressing seeing the compliance and so on. However, I think it was the sort of bottoming out, and we're on we could, and I think we are starting on a upward trajectory here, because at the time people were frightened, but I've started to see a bit of a significant turnaround in people's attitudes. Before COVID, a lot of people either followed the global warming fraud or didn't say anything about it. But after COVID, I've noticed quite a turnaround, even on, I'm reading comments on the ABC where 3/4 of the people are saying, look, this is just rubbish. It's a scam. And that's that's on the ABC.
That's saying something.
And before that, it would be at 97 in favour to 3 against. So people are starting to wake up slowly. The problem I think that we've had is that, generally as conservatives and people on the nominal right, is that we took our eye off the ball. And what happened very slowly was, well, first of all, there's the long march. I call it the long goose step through the institutions, because the left don't march, they only goose step.
I like that. Yeah.
Where we've ended up is that we've voted in, sadly, infants. We have infants in charge of the world, and then we turned our backs and thought everything would be fine. Maybe nipped out to the shops for a while, and we've come back, and with the infants who've been let loose in the house, we've come back, and there's paint all over the walls, and there's paint all over the Van Gogh, and the kids have glued themselves to the sofa, and the boys have got into mum's makeup drawer and put makeup on and dresses, and they're walking around in high heels. And this is the situation we've got ourselves in because we took
literally.
Literally. The bath's overflowing, and they're blaming it on climate change. It's kind of shocking to us, I think, and we're probably sort of frozen in fright, almost, like at the immensity of the mess that we have to clear up because we weren't really paying attention and we took our eye off the ball. But it's not unfixable. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Matt Keane is not that light at the end of the tunnel, because under Matt Keane there is no light at the end of the tunnel, because renewables, especially at night. I think.
Well, there might be. It's it'll be the electric powered train called Total Control that's heading towards you, and you better get off those train tracks pretty quickly, I'd suggest. But
Yes.
Anyway, go on. How this is the question I'm really wanting to ask, because as you can tell, I'm a little bit black-pilled about all of this. I mean, how is it in Western democracies when you look at the man boys that are in charge of Canada, the WF control we have over places like Canada again and New Zealand, here in Australia, in the US, you just think, boy, oh boy, the trajectory is just always towards more leftist policies, more control, more crony capitalism, on and on it goes. How are we going to right this ship? Do you really see that the ability to right the ship happening in Western democracy?
Well, yeah, look, it's happened before, as they say. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. And we're just going through another one of those rhyming periods in history. I think, just to quote Will Durant, who said, "A great civilization is not conquered from without until it has destroyed itself from within." And that's kind of what's happening at the moment. And that quote goes on. He says, "The essential causes of Rome's decline lay in her people, her morals, her class struggle, her failing trade, her bureaucratic despotism, her stifling taxes, and her consuming wars." Well, yeah, if you look at...
Sound familiar?
Yeah, exactly. It's very, very familiar. And yeah,
I used this quote in a speech I gave the other week, but it was a black pill speech. It was a speech about that I think that Western civilization is ultimately going to collapse. Do we have a difference of opinion here, though? Is there a way around that what I think might be an inevitability?
Yeah, I think we will come out of this. It's going to be hard. There's going to be casualties, but we will come out of this. I saw something the other day on my screensaver which said lions sleep for 20 hours a day. I thought, wow, that's amazing. I think that's what we've been doing. The lions have been sleeping and we've just woken up, and then kind of late in the day, I guess. But, when lions wake up, watch out. That's all I can say, is that when the lions wake up, watch out. Because the hyenas are out there and they're running around gibbering and laughing. And it's like, well, the lions are waking up now. And we get through this by just uplifting each other and making ourselves stronger and speaking out. That's so important. Speaking out is really important. People sometimes laugh at me and go, "I've never heard of a conservative activist." And I'm like, exactly. You need to get active. It's the first three letters of it. Act, do something. Don't sit there and wait for somebody else to do something. There's no superhero riding in on a white horse to save us. You're the person that's going to save you and your family. But you have to get up and you have to speak and you have to act. And I've got to say, in America, they are getting this and they are doing this in a big way in so many different areas, confronting the school boards and the libraries, and at the grassroots doing this. It's pretty amazing to watch. We're a bit slower off the mark, but we'll get there. We'll learn from them. And I'm a bit more white-pilled about this, because I just can't see people throwing away Western civilization so quickly and so easily. I think when the TV stopped working, the Xbox stops working, you can't post anymore on Instagram. I think when you can't charge your phone for 3 days, all those children who've been voting Greens all their lives will have a tantrum, and that will be the learning point for them. Yeah, that will be their awakening.
Mm-hmm. Well, we can only hope that the world that they've tried to build will collapse in on itself and waken them up to that reality that you've spoken about there. Thank you very much, Jeffrey, for enlightening us on some of the myths around climate alarmism. Thank you very much for taking up the cudgels for libertarianism and liberty and putting your name forward as a candidate in the New South Wales election. We wish you all the very best, and let's not be a stranger. I think we should talk in the future at some point. Thanks very much for joining us, Jeff.
Thank you, George. And please check out my website.
Show. Please, what's the website quickly?
Notkeen.com.au. Because I'm not keen.
George Christensen Show. Thanks very much, Jeff. George Christensen Show here on TNT Radio. Pleasure having you.